All right, let's dive into this Undoing Yourself with Energized Meditation and Other Devices.
By Christopher Hyatt.
Right, Christopher Hyatt. It's got introductions by Robert Anton Wilson, Israel Regardie, and even an afterword by Antello Ali.
Quite the lineup.
Yeah, it can sound kind of intimidating, but I think we can unpack some of these ideas. Yeah, like Hyatt's approach to, I guess you could say, self-transformation, pull out some of those interesting things about consciousness, ego, even just challenging some of those norms, the societal ones that we just take for granted sometimes.
Well, I think what's interesting about Hyatt is that he's blending psychology, philosophy, esoteric practices,
Yeah.
all into this really playful, almost irreverent tone.
Yeah, he's got those great little quotes sprinkled throughout.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Futons love yes, fossils hate us.
right.
But his message is serious, He's arguing that most of us are living like essentially robots programmed by society.
Okay, so who are the futents and who are the fossils then?
So the futents would be the ones who embrace change, who are willing to challenge that status quo and break free from those ingrained patterns that keep us stuck. The fossils, on the other hand, they represent the clinging to outdated beliefs and systems, resisting that flow of evolution.
He even calls us, at one point, constipated dogmamites.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty vivid image.
Yeah, and
Wow.
it gets to the heart of his critique of dogma. He's arguing that we are bombarded with all these belief systems that limit our perception and keep us trapped in these loops of conditioned responses. He even goes so far as to compare dogma to LSD,
Oh, wow.
creating these shared hallucinations.
That we mistake for reality. Whoa.
Yeah.
It makes you think about all those beliefs that we just inherit or absorb without even questioning. It's like, what if dogma is the ultimate bad trip?
Right, and this is where Robert Anton Wilson's introduction is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because he supports Hyatt's argument, suggesting that true free will is pretty rare. We think we're making choices, but a lot of the time we're just acting out these ingrained programs.
So then how do we break free?
Well, Hyatt talks about something called energized meditation.
Which sounds intense.
It is. It's not your typical, sit and be still meditation.
Right.
Hyatt emphasizes that tension actually blocks the effectiveness of meditation.
Oh, interesting.
He wants us to use movement and focused awareness to destroy those thought patterns that keep us stuck.
So achieve a state of mindlessness, like a blank slate.
Yeah, to reprogram.
So he even includes specific physical exercises
Oh, yeah.
in the book, like stretching and twisting, and even a quick breath technique. It reminds me, I don't know, almost of yoga or martial arts or something.
It's a good connection. And it highlights the importance of work in these traditions like Sufism and Hermeticism that Hyatt is drawing from. It's not about passively hoping for change. It's about engaging in practices that disrupt those automatic robotic responses.
And Wilson even shares an anecdote about this jam jar experiment in his introduction.
Yeah.
I love this story because it really shows how we get stuck in those rigid categories.
So this scientist fills a jar with random stuff, right? And asks people to guess what it is.
Okay.
The point is that people get so caught up trying to label it that they miss the ever-changing contents.
Like, what is it? Yeah.
Right. They're so focused on this is a why that they can't see the dynamic process unfolding in front of them.
Oh, yeah. It makes you think, like, how often do we do that?
No.
Get stuck in those predefined boxes instead of seeing the nuance and the flux of reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of those rigid categories, Hyatt has this pretty strong critique of how Western thought is influenced by Aristotle.
He argues that Aristotle's emphasis on fixed definitions, that A is A mentality,
Yeah.
limits our ability to perceive change
Yeah.
and understand the interconnectedness of things.
He uses the example, I think, of the statement, he is a homosexual. It seems simple, but he's pointing out how the same label can have completely different meanings in different contexts for different people.
Right. It ties back to the jam jar. We can't reduce individuals to simplistic labels.
Right.
Each person is a unique, dynamic process.
And this is kind of like what Wilson's talking about when he brings up Korzybski, right?
Yeah.
In his introduction.
Korzybski argued that we should be using these mathematical subscripts to highlight the differences between individuals.
Right. Even within groups that seem really homogenous.
There's no, Jew 1 is Jew 2 is Jew 3.
Right.
We're all constantly evolving,
We're changing.
and language often fails to capture that.
So we're seeing these threads here, right?
Yeah.
Breaking free from those limiting dogmas,
Yeah.
embracing the fluidity of reality, and using tools like this energized meditation to reprogram our minds. But then he takes it further with this argument about how dogma is maintained and spread.
Oh, he doesn't hold back. He calls those who uphold and enforce dogma pushers, like they're dealing some mind-numbing drug.
Like pushers, wow.
And he talks about this dogma illness, where people who deviate from accepted beliefs are seen as sick and in need of treatment.
Brainwashing.
Which he equates to brainwashing.
Right, which is, I think, a really important point.
Yeah.
Because it challenges us to look at the systems, the structures that are actually shaping our thinking.
Yeah.
Like, what dogmas are we unknowingly subscribing to? And who are the pushers in our lives?
Right. It's a question worth asking ourselves. And it leads to another key idea that Hyatt explores, this reproduction bias.
Now, that's where things get interesting. What is this reproduction bias?
So Hyatt argues that societal structures are inherently biased towards the continuation of the species, even if it means sacrificing individual freedom and potential.
Oh, wow.
He's not saying that reproduction itself is bad.
Right.
But he's highlighting how this biological imperative can be manipulated.
Right, to maintain the status quo.
Yeah, to maintain the status quo, exactly. And he's particularly critical of democracy as it's practiced today.
Oh, interesting.
You know, pointing to the influence of money and special interest groups that perpetuate this bias.
So it's about recognizing those hidden agendas that are masked by these seemingly benevolent goals.
Exactly. And he actually proposes a radical alternative. Random representation through a national lottery.
A lottery.
A lottery, yeah.
Wow.
He's suggesting that maybe our current systems are too entrenched in this reproduction bias to truly serve the individual.
Wow.
And that this lottery system would encourage social responsibility and require training for all citizens, not just those seeking power.
Wow. That's definitely something to think about.
It is.
It makes you question how much of our lives are dictated by this drive, to reproduce and maintain the power structure.
Absolutely.
Like, what freedoms are we giving up in the name of those expectations?
It's a question that resonates on so many levels, from the personal to the political. Absolutely. And as we continue to delve into undoing yourself, we'll explore even more of these challenging and fascinating concepts.
Awesome. Let's keep going. We've been talking about, undoing those patterns. Societal that keep us kind of stuck.
Yeah.
But then Hyatt dives into this really profound territory.
He does.
When he starts exploring
the numinous.
The numinous.
Yeah.
This might surprise some readers, I think.
It might.
Who come in expecting something purely secular.
Right.
Or anti-religion.
But he's not.
He's not advocating for any particular belief system.
He's more interested in how different cultures define it.
The numinous.
This idea of God or the divine.
Yeah.
And how those definitions shape us.
Our understanding.
Our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
So it's more about examining our relationship to the unknown than accepting, doctrines.
Exactly. He contrasts the Christian God, like the God of the West.
Right.
With African gods, the Greek god Dionysus, to show how these cultures conceptualize the divine.
Okay.
He even has these 7-point scales.
I love those scales.
I know.
He rates these deities on different qualities, strength, orderliness, lustfulness.
Their attitude towards humanity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So he's not just saying God is this or God is that.
Yeah.
It's more about how these conceptions
can be both liberating and limiting.
Right. Depending on how they're interpreted and enforced.
Yeah.
It ties back into the whole undoing yourself thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about questioning those beliefs.
Even about something as fundamental as God. He's not saying God doesn't exist,
right,
but encouraging us to explore what it means to us. Personally, rather than just blindly accepting someone else's definition.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is how he talks about his own relationships.
His own numinous.
Throughout the book,
Yeah.
He shares some pretty personal stuff.
About his upbringing. About his God. And how that understanding of God shifted as he went through. Encounter different things.
Different philosophies, different practices.
Right.
It really highlights how for Hyatt, the numinous isn't this static.
It's evolving as we grow and change.
Yeah.
So it's this constant process
of
searching,
redefining.
Yeah.
It's almost like the more we try to pin it down, with rigid definitions, the more it kind of
eludes us,
yeah.
It's this force.
It's bigger than our
human comprehension.
Right?
Totally.
And this leads to, I think, a really important...
to his fascination with
chaos.
Yeah.
This might seem counterintuitive at first.
It might.
You know, when we think about self-transformation, we think about creating order, structure.
Yeah.
But he seems to view chaos as like a source of
creative potential.
Right. So it's not like
not just disorder and destruction.
Right.
It's about embracing that inherent unpredictability of life.
It's a flux that we often try to control or deny.
Yeah, and he sees that struggle against chaos as a form of resistance.
That limits us.
That limits our growth, yeah.
And Antero Alley, in his afterword, describes Hyatt as this quick decay artist.
I love that.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Who embraces creative destruction.
To break free from those self-structures that we build.
Is rigid
structure.
Right. And he even uses this metaphor of the pregnant woman inside a suit of armor.
Oh, such a great image.
I know, right?
It's so powerful.
Like,
wrapped.
That creative potential is just trapped by...
Right, by societal conditioning.
Those expectations.
Yeah, totally.
And this ties into his interpretation of the fall.
Of Adam and Eve.
You know, the Adam and Eve story.
Yeah.
It's interesting because he sees Eve's choice to eat the apple.
Which is often portrayed as a transgression.
Right, as a bad thing.
He sees it as a necessary step.
It's a move from innocence to experience.
Yeah.
It's driven by curiosity, a desire for knowledge.
Yeah, embracing the unknown.
Even if it means defying the rules.
Those rules that were meant to keep us ignorant.
In a state of ignorance,
yeah.
It's like that Nietzsche quote.
Which one?
That which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He seems to be suggesting that we need to fall apart.
To
break free from those illusions in order to
really grow. Yeah, he sees that falling apart as a kind of initiation.
Yeah.
A journey into the shadow side.
Where we encounter those hidden aspects.
Yeah, we try to repress.
Right, that we deny.
And
this is where he starts talking about magic.
Yeah.
But it's not about, you know...
Not spells and incantations like we might see in the movies or whatever.
It's more about understanding.
Harnessing our own energy.
Yeah, both physical and psychological. To create change.
He calls it Western sexual magic.
Okay.
And he's drawing from Aleister Crowley and his own collaboration with Israel Regardie, who was a key figure in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Right.
So it's a system that emphasizes intense self-discipline, energy control, directing that energy toward achieving...
Jewel,
yeah.
And he's clear that this is not about self-indulgence.
It's not.
It's about channeling that energy.
That's often associated with sexuality into something transformative.
So he outlines these practices and movements designed to, you know, intensify, control...
sexual energy.
Right. But he stresses, I think, the responsibility.
The ethical use of these techniques. He even talks about using these practices to open chakras.
Okay, those energy centers in the body.
And to access information from the collective unconscious.
Now, this sounds pretty far out.
It does.
What does he mean by that?
Well, this concept comes from Jungian psychology.
This vast reservoir of archetypes, instincts, shared human experiences.
What we all tap into.
Okay. Hyatt seems to believe that through these practices,
we can access
this deeper level of awareness and gain insights that would normally be hidden.
So it's almost like we have this incredible potential, but it's blocked by those social and psychological barriers that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and this leads to another really interesting concept. The magical child.
The magical child.
Now, this can be interpreted literally as a physical offspring.
Right.
But he also uses it as a symbol.
Of a transformed self.
Or potential reborn.
So it's not just about having children.
Not in the traditional sense.
It's about giving birth.
To a new version of ourselves.
Right. Free from those limitations that have been holding us back.
Realizing that transformation is this ongoing process.
Right. This continuous cycle.
Yeah. Of undoing and recreating. We've covered a lot.
Exotic realm.
We've talked about societal programming.
The nature of the numinous.
Embracing chaos.
The power of magic.
And it seems like all these things point toward...
this liberation.
Yeah. Breaking free from those constraints that keep us from...
our full
realizing our full potential.
Absolutely.
And Hyatt doesn't shy away, I think...
No, he doesn't.
From introducing some really radical concepts.
Yeah.
That challenge those power structures.
Deeply ingrained.
Right. That shape our world.
One of the most fascinating and controversial, perhaps, is this idea of...
the Order of the White Lion.
The Order of the White Line.
The Order of the White Line. That sounds like straight out of like fantasy or something.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. What is this order and how does it fit into this whole,
Undoing yourself.
Yeah.
So the Order of the White Lion, or OWL, is this concept that Hyatt introduces towards the end.
Okay.
He's a little vague about the origins, the structure. Yeah. He even suggests it might be entirely mythical.
Yeah.
But it seems to represent this idea of a group or a movement that emerges to challenge those power structures that we've been discussing.
So is he talking about a secret society or something?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
He doesn't give us a membership list or rituals or anything. It's more like he's using this OWL as a symbol for the kind of radical shift that's needed.
In consciousness.
In consciousness, yeah.
To break free from
current systems.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how does this order, real or imagined, relate to this idea of undoing yourself?
So for Hyatt, the OWL represents a conscious effort to dismantle those societal structures.
That limit,
yeah.
Potential.
Individual potential, yeah.
Okay.
And he specifically focuses on the role of women in this new era, suggesting that they will play a key role in bringing about this transformation.
So it's about empowering those who have been marginalized or suppressed.
He sees women as the scientists, inventors, artists.
Leading the way.
Leading the way, yeah. Breaking free from the reproduction bias.
And those patriarchal systems.
And the systems that perpetuate it.
So if this order is more symbol than, an actual organization, what's the takeaway then?
I think he's encouraging us to embody those principles.
Regardless of
our gender, our social standing, it's about embracing those qualities of creativity, innovation, challenging the status quo.
Recognizing that.
Power,
of collective action.
Yeah, to create change.
It's not about waiting for someone to save us.
No.
It's about taking responsibility for our own liberation and working together to create something
more just equitable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Hyatt's vision isn't utopian.
Right.
He acknowledges the challenges
that come with this kind of
radical transformation. But he sees this struggle as necessary.
Yeah, for growth.
Yeah, for growth and evolution.
You know what I find compelling?
What's that?
Is that he doesn't just,
present these theories.
Present these abstract theories. Yeah. He weaves in his own experience.
It's personal experiences,
throughout the book.
It makes it feel more
grounded,
relatable.
He talks about his, unconventional upbringing.
His time in the Marines.
Yeah, his experiences with drugs.
Cultured states.
His evolving understanding of sexuality.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
It's honest and raw.
But it's real.
He's lived these ideas.
Right, and you see his journey reflected in those themes. He's constantly questioning, experimenting, pushing those boundaries.
A true embodiment of undoing yourself.
He talks about this awakening he had, I think, as a teenager.
Yeah.
Where he realizes that he was living within
the walls of his own mind.
Yeah, and reacting to these constructs.
Yeah, as if they were
reality.
Reality, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be profound.
It seems to have been a turning point.
It set him on this path
of relentless self-exploration.
Yeah.
Searching for those glimpses beyond the programmed reality.
He doesn't shy away, from those darker parts of that journey.
Oh, no.
He talks about the anger.
His fascination with death.
Yeah. The macabre.
Erotic asphyxia.
It's intense.
Yeah, it is.
But it speaks to this willingness.
To confront those taboo subjects. To examine
those parts of ourselves that we
try to hide.
Deny.
Yeah, deny.
He's not afraid to
delve into the shadow.
Yeah, and in doing so, challenges us to look
at our own assumptions about what's good or evil.
Yeah.
What's acceptable.
What's not.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what makes this book so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable.
It's not meant to be.
It's meant to provoke.
To challenge.
To inspire us.
To inspire us to take responsibility.
For our own evolution.
He leaves us with this final thought.
Magic is the ground of life. Magic is the ground of life.
Yeah.
And that really encapsulates it, I think, this whole idea.
Like it's about recognizing that we have the power
To shape
our own reality. But that power comes from
understanding,
mastering our own energy, confronting our fears.
challenging assumptions.
Yeah, it's not about spells and rituals.
In the traditional sense.
It's about cultivating that magical mindset.
Right, that willingness to experiment, to explore.
To break free from those limitations.
So it's about embracing the chaotic beauty of existence and realizing that transformation is ongoing.
There's no end point.
It's a lifelong
journey
of undoing and recreating ourselves.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered a lot in our deep dive into undoing yourself.
It's a book full of challenging ideas.
And I hope this encourages you
to explore Hyatt's work.
Yeah, see what insights you might discover.
On your own journey.
Yeah, on your own journey of self-discovery.
It's a book that rewards multiple readings.
Yeah.
And deep contemplation.
And remember, as Hyatt says, undo yourself.
Embrace the chaos.
Challenge the dogma.
Create your own magic.